Welcome to SCDM's AI and eSource podcast series. My name is Linda King, and I'm the SCDM facilitator for the eSource Implementation Consortium. The consortium's mission is to advance the adoption of eSource in clinical research. The use of artificial intelligence in its many forms, whether generative AI, agentic AI, machine learning, natural language processing, large language models, or GPT, has the potential to increase eSource adoption through the most effective implementation processes, documentation, training, validation, etc. This podcast series will talk with folks using AI and eSource from multiple clinical research perspectives, sites, sponsors, and tech vendors. Our guest today is Cory Ennis. Cory is representing a site perspective. Cory serves as the Assistant Dean for Research Systems, Strategy, and Innovation within the Duke University School of Medicine, where he leads the development and implementation of enterprise-wide research informatics solutions. With over 25 years of experience in healthcare IT and academic research, he provides strategic oversight for clinical research infrastructure, ensuring alignment with institutional goals and compliance with NIH data management policies, HIPAA, NIST, and FISMA regulations. In his role, Cory manages the life cycle of clinical research IT systems, including biospecimen information management, integrated data repositories linking electronic health records with genomics data, and scalable cloud-based storage solutions. He works closely with the Duke Health Technology Services, the Office of Academic Solutions and Information Systems, and the Duke Office of Clinical Research to optimize research data management, streamline IT costs, and enhance system usability and adoption. Cory is instrumental in fostering institutional collaborations and external partnerships, including contributions to clinical and translational science award initiatives. He leads strategic initiatives to identify and address gaps in research support services, engage with vendor partners to ensure efficient system integrations, and provides consultative expertise to clinical investigators. His work has been integral in advancing research infrastructure at Duke, supporting data-driven discovery and ensuring regulatory-compliant research environments. Welcome, Cory.
Oh, well, thank you, Linda. I'm quite happy to be here. I think it's a really interesting and exciting topic. So I'm looking forward to a really good discussion.
Thank you. I did want to do a quick SCDM disclaimer before we jump in and get started. This podcast is provided by the Society for Clinical Data Management, eSource Implementation Consortium. It is intended for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal, regulatory, or professional advice. SCDM does not endorse or promote any technology vendors. SCDM and the speakers are not responsible for any actions taken based on the information provided. Users are advised to consult with appropriate professionals for specific advice tailored to their individual circumstances. The opinions expressed are attributed to the speakers only and not their respective employers. Well, let's get started. Cory, before we dive into AI, could you start by sharing what area of eSource that you focus on the most? For example, it could be EHR to EDC or EHR to sponsored, digital health tech, digital protocols, data flow, etc.
Sure. I sit in a bit of an air traffic control role when it comes to digital technology and data for research at Duke. And specific to eSource, that would be around how we select and govern and implement eSource tools from an enterprise perspective. I look at eSource as kind of the plumbing that gets data from patients and hospitals into research databases. And my job is to make sure that the plumbing is safe, well labeled, connects where it's supposed to go, and that any AI tools we are developing here at Duke are tied into and aligned to the strategy of where eSource is going as well. So I would say my perspective is that we're using AI to make the whole eSource ecosystem and everything that surrounds it more compliant, smarter, safer, scalable, all those good things.
Thank you. That's a great analogy for plumbing. That makes a lot of sense. As you think about some of your eSource work that you've been doing, Can you share what kind of projects involving AI that you're currently evaluating and maybe working on? And if you can, what type of AI technologies?
Sure. So my focus is really enterprise level, and eSource is one of those things. But I don't know that I consider it a single product line. There's a lot of eSource components that sort of make up the larger eSource ecosystem. So, ECOA and EPRO platforms, the classic EHR to EDC integration, digital health tools and things. So we're really looking at how do we target eSource technologies in research at this point, and using AI to identify when those projects are a good fit for eSource. I do see a future where AI is a lot more integrated into eSource directly, but right now, I think that I'll give you a good example. The way I look at it is you can imagine a study team saying, hey, I need this app, whether that's because it's their favorite app or because it's something a sponsor recommended or what have you. So I'm the person that says, okay, this is great. It does, though, interface with our EHR, and that means it has to meet privacy rules, compliance rules, has to be a good match for our infrastructure and those sorts of things. So we want to be able to say, I understand your need, but how good a fit is what you're trying to do? And then, almost more importantly, is this a singular use instance of this, or is this something that we could use going forward for other studies so we're not reinventing the wheel all the time?
That makes a lot of sense. Looking at it holistically, and where AI can add the most value. And maybe just to tag on to something you said about AI being integrated into like related workflows. Um, Workflows that are around like protocol, feasibility, things like that. Are you working on projects like that? And if you are or planning, is there any AI training or upskilling that you would consider at Duke?
Yeah, there's probably two main ways that AI is getting implemented in the question you just asked. So I'll tackle them one at a time. So institution wide, we are using AI in both the early, more pre award portions of the research workflow. We have a tool that's been homegrown called Devil's Advocate that will help folks go in and say, I have this grant I want to apply for. And it will ask them questions like, does it involve human subjection? Or does it have any type of foreign involvement? These things, and it can then flag them and say, these are the things you probably need to be thinking about as you go and apply for this grant. So trying to get in front of them earlier so that they can actually strategically plan for the different types of challenges they're going to run into, as opposed to what we've seen historically, which is they get the grant, they show up with their money, and even though we told them go be innovative and entrepreneurial and go get grants and do neat things, and they come back and they say, look, I did it, and then we say, oh, well, that's great, but you can't do it like that. We're trying to get them in a space where they know way ahead of time, these are the types of things I'm going to have to address, and we're using AI to try and help them there. And then we also have a system that is just now being piloted called Scout, which is an AI driven system that is able to consume all of the data in our EHR and then take that and let researchers and clinicians go in and interact with it in a much more conversational manner. So they can go in and look up cohorts, they can do all sorts of things. And instead of having to go in and say, oh, I'm going to kind of try to build a cohort with a SQL query, and then I'm going to do 1,000 chart reviews to see if that's what I need. Scout's going to let these folks search the full EHR. They can get notes, imaging reports, pathology reports, labs, structured outputs, note templates, all sorts of stuff. And that they can pull out in minutes in something that could have taken them days or certainly hours before. So there are plans to eventually try to build in an eSource component that'll be more so for I want to pull Duke data into a Duke EDC, but I think we'll learn a lot from it and be able to apply that to the more traditional eSource going to sponsor EDCs in the future. The second thing is a lot of us that are in the midst of the administrative parts of the research workflow have been leveraging AI in a very individual way to create agents. So things that I can say, instead of me having to read through a 60-page protocol and understand what it is that might take me several hours, I can write an agent with a prompt that gives me all the info I need and looks up things like data sources that might need additional attention, or if those do require additional attention, is the funding going to be sufficient to cover the costs? And is this something that an EDC, or I'm sorry, an eSource solution would be appropriate for? And I can just feed that protocol into the agent and have it kick me out an answer in under a minute. Doesn't mean that it's my final answer, but it's something that we've done with contracts, we've done it with protocols, we've done it with data request type workflow forms and workflows. And I have just recently presented a plan to the dean of our medical school that she gave me a green light on, where I'm going to take those and push them into our individual clinical research units, hopefully getting the same result that I sort of described with the Devil's Advocate and Scout, where folks are able to do much more early feasibility triage of their protocols and deal with problems and get answers before they become very, very difficult further down in the workflow, such as like the IRB or the contract execution phase.
That sounds great. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities on different areas. I think, mentioning the protocols or even contracts and things, just to make sure that you've considered a lot of things. And I love your homegrown Devil's Advocate name. That's a great one. Everyone can immediately understand what that tool is there for. Are there AI tools that you're currently using, like ChatGPT or Copilot? And do you have governance or policy around how you use those specific tools as well?
Yeah, we do. So our health system side uses an enterprise Microsoft Copilot, right? And the goal there was, as you know, Copilot's integrated into all of the Microsoft products already. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to use it with PHI, because we knew that it would inadvertently get used with PHI regardless. So we have a very, very in-depth agreement with Microsoft. The goal there really kind of being, the way AI works is that anything you ask AI becomes part of sort of a data sphere, right? That AI can tap into later. And when it comes to PHI, obviously there are regulations around protecting that data. So we needed to be able to use Copilot, but without the concern that the data would leave Duke. So we have positioned Copilot to be our health system AI tool. And that is both part of the agents I discussed earlier, which I kind of feel like is very important in being able to democratize the use of AI to folks that may or may not be all that adept at leveraging technical tools and things. But also, we currently, I have a project where we're putting a bunch of biospecimen data into Microsoft Fabric, and we are then lining that up with the health record data of those Duke patients, and then putting Copilot in front of it. So people can still go in and do all their SQL and Python queries and all that. But if you have a resident or a student or a new researcher that isn't particularly adept at coding, this gives them a chance to actually interrogate that data in a very, very familiar and easy way, and simply say, show me all of the Duke patients that have a specimen of this type and also have this diagnosis code. And it will kick out the list of those patients. Then they can say, okay, now add in this or remove that. And on the fly, compared to what used to be them requesting data dumps over and over to try to get where they want, now they can literally use Copilot to do that. And we have some plans to expand that beyond just the specimens. But like all new tech, we're trying to wade through all of the different concerns as well as the related institutional policies we need to and workflows we need to put in place around, okay, this is now a tool that's available. Here's the programmatic security we can include. But what do we need to do to make sure that we're saying, okay, do you have a protocol if you're going to do that sort of interaction with the data versus are you just looking for aggregates and counts and those kinds of things? So it's an early, a little bit of a nascent phase, but yeah, I think it shows a lot of promise. And I think it's going to open up the ability for a large group of researchers to look at this data that previously would have been extremely limited, either because lack of expertise, lack of funding, the various reasons.
That sounds great. I think the whole piece about empowering people to be able to interact with the tool that they are comfortable with will really be more efficient and effective in the long run. And like I said, a lot quicker too to get that information. As you're thinking about that and probably the end users and things, it was one thing that you mentioned about them getting their information quicker. Are there other challenges? Are there even risks that you're anticipating when you start implementing more and more AI within workflows? Maybe prompt training is necessary, or are there other risks that you're thinking about around data protection and things like that?
Yeah, I think you have to. And, AI is a lot like a really eager intern, right? It wants to help with everything. It does it cheerfully, and it'll help with stuff whether you ask it to or not sometimes, right? And so I sort of view it in an odd way. Instead of having to teach people when to use it, it's almost more important to teach them when not to use it, right? So I think everyone struggles with, I would love to be able to have an AI app that listens to my patient encounter and transcribes it all and summarizes it and gives me action items and all this. And I have one I can install on my iPhone because I see it out there in the App Store. But you can't do that. And we have to be able to make sure folks understand what they can and can't do. And then beyond that, I think obviously there's the normal, we have to figure out how to protect the sensitive data. So anything PHI, proprietary, what have you, those types of things, we have to be able to use AI, but also protect everything that we're supposed to protect. And I think that's one reason you see things like Scout and Devil's Advocate completely run within a Duke secure environment, right? They're there so that we can say, okay, this is all within Duke. Everybody's trained. We should be good. And I think related to that is making sure that anything that's done with AI, we can audit, that we can, it has traceability and we can see what was done by who, what happened to it and all that stuff. And I think if we can do those two things, we can tackle the compliance and security pieces of it. Then I think, as we touched on earlier, it's the integrating it into the actual workflows without confusing the folks that are actually doing the workflows. And I think that one, change is always really hard. In site-based research, especially, folks do things the same way they've been doing them for 20 years. And it's not because there aren't better ways to do them. It's because this is how they've been doing it for 20 years. And they see no reason to change. It's all working fine. Now, I do think some of the financial pressures that have come with changes to funding, the evolution of regulatory requirements and technology are sort of forcing everyone's hand somewhat. But I think we have to be able to understand that AI is that eager intern and it will help you. But you, whether you're an investigator or a research practice manager or a data manager or just an administrator, you're still responsible for the end result of whatever AI just helped you with. So maybe a trust but verify approach is what we're going to have to insert into the culture a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's really hard to change, for sure. So change management often is lagging behind all the tech updates, but it's a critical piece. Um, as you were talking about the different processes and about integrating into different workflows, how do you anticipate or see AI benefiting in a clinical research environment? Is it really early with planning the study? Is it actually executing the study, or maybe even downstream in data review and analysis, or maybe all of it?
Yeah, I think all of it, honestly. I think it's just a matter of figuring out the how, which is no simple feat. But I think that it can't, AI, even if you want to oversimplify it, is an excellent automation tool. And a lot of what happens in research are very repeatable steps. I gave an example internally where I said, and I think this is really important too, because AI can only work with what it's given, right? So it's almost a classic garbage in, garbage out to like dust off that old chestnut. But I think that if you don't have good policies, processes, data, whatever to feed your AI tool, it's not going to give you good answers. And so I get a lot of folks saying, why don't we have an AI driven chatbot that'll tell me everything I need to do? And unfortunately, the answer is because we don't have a way to tell it everything to do. So we need to work on getting better about some very formalized and documented pathways, which is sort of that project I mentioned earlier that I'm trying to do. It's much bigger than just giving the individual units access to agents. It's rethinking our entire research workflow with an eye towards where AI can help. So I can see it helping in the early stages with understanding, how to fill out your grant and what you're doing. Although you got to be careful about a lot of folks don't allow AI generated content in their grant applications, but you can still use it to help understand what you're applying to. Then I think we can use AI to help people understand regulatory and compliance hurdles, funding requirements they're going to have to deal with. And then in a perfect world, I would love, as we document this stuff, AI to help create things like NIH required research lifecycle data plans, right? And then at some point, I would love to see the IRBs become a little more templatized and have AI be able to take all the data collected on this study so far and put data into the different IRB fields based on what somebody's doing. And if you extend it even further, I would love to be able to say, let's capture all of the consent language we have. Let's let AI compare, merge that with the success of enrollment we've had based on the target populations we've had, and start making recommendations on consent language that is understandable and motivating to target populations that you're trying to recruit for this study based on the success of the past. All that data is there. We just got to pull it together and use it and make it actionable so that AI can do something with it. But I think it's all possible.
Yeah, that feedback loop would be critical to continue to improve the processes over time. I think that's a great idea. And as you think about how AI can help with a certain system like IRBs or such, are you also considering it to interrogate data from multiple systems at the same time? Maybe it's something that you had just touched on.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the beauties of Fabric, right? Is we've always struggled with how can I have both all of my health record data and perhaps a bunch of genomic data that I did sequencing on specimens and generated all this genomic data, but it's not part of the health record, but it is from a Duke patient. How can I tie those things together so that I can do everything from think of new research studies to large scale outcomes and all these sort of decision support things and all this stuff. And it was always difficult before because you had to kind of create a database that was custom fit for that purpose. And that's a heavy lift. And that's not just the compliance and security pieces. That is the infrastructure and the people and the DBAs and everybody you need to do that. Well, Fabric, I always tell people, is a lot more like a Lego set, right? And you have your base platform and you have all of these different data assets, and you can think of them as like blocks in your Lego set. And once you add them to Fabric, you can grab a data set and stick it on the platform and grab another one and stick it on the platform. And you can combine those data in your interrogations, but not have to build a fit for purpose database to do it. And then those things can sort of go back to being available when you're done. And I think that's a real game changer, especially when you consider Copilot in front of it, where we're going to be able to start to say, hey, we've got all the health record data. It remains secure and it stays in its thing. But we've also got all this data we collected from Duke patients in a prospective manner. And now I want to be able to compare those things, or I want to combine them, or I want just to like leverage them against each other, those sorts of things. And I think that'll make a big difference. That's something we struggled with my entire time at Duke. And I think Fabric's going to be our answer to how we do that. And I think Copilot will be our answer to making the availability of it much easier for folks.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Like you said, having that ability to kind of shift around and put data in the right place and where you need it, and so that you can ask the right questions. It sounds like there's a lot of really cool ideas and things you're working on and things that are in progress. When you're thinking about all of that, are there frameworks that you're thinking of, that you're following, like AI standards? And if so, are there challenges around implementing or aligning with those types of frameworks?
Oh, sure. I mean, so I think of the frameworks in sort of a two-parter, right? So there's the frameworks that we institutionally institute at Duke. And that could be different than how Vanderbilt or somebody else institutes the same framework. A good example is, I think people are headed this way, but we very early on, once all of the databases like 23andMe and Ancestry.com started to really gain a lot of traction with folks, we decided, well, genomic data that used to not be considered PHI, I think we need to consider it PHI, because if you have the right skill sets, re-identifiability is actually there now. And so that's a good example of a Duke framework and guideline that we're sort of saying, okay, genomic data is going to have to be handled this way. And so we do all of that and set our regulatory expectations around everything from validation of systems to data integrity to the eSource stuff, and how that's going to work and what it's going to look like. And then we have more of the external frameworks that are supplied by the FDA and others. And we sort of look at those as the guardrails that we have to build our internal frameworks within, right? And so AI, because it is such a broad and far-reaching tech, we have to be really careful about both how we implement it and where the data that it's interacting with lives, goes, gets seen, and all that. But we also have to make sure that we, I guess I'll call it, properly label these systems to say, like devil's advocate, for example, we labeled it clearly that says these are sanity checks, not compliance certifications, right? And that these proposals should not leave Duke servers. So in addition to building it a certain way, we're also saying, hey, folks, you have to understand what this tool is and what it's not, right? Sort of a callback to that. It's not so much getting them to use it, it's telling them when not to use it, or maybe even how not to use it. And I think that's really going to be important, because these systems are popping up left and right, and they're easily accessible. A lot of them you can download from the various app stores and use free versions. And we really have to start making people understand that it's not like this magic box. It's literally high-tech stuff happening in data centers all around the world, and anything that you put in there is getting included in that, and you need to be careful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think the education part, training people to use it, but also just what are the constraints that you might have, and what's important, for each individual organization needs to be clearly documented and shared with end users. I thought we would kind of look to the future here, just to wrap up a great conversation. Thinking about looking ahead, what changes do you foresee, in scaling AI, across eSource? It could be the tech, it could be the governance, could be workforce readiness, or just speaking of. But what kind of things are you looking ahead about?
Yeah, I think right now AI, especially in research, but probably even to some extent within healthcare, it feels like lots of little islands of AI solutions scattered all over the place, right? And even internally, right? We'll do a Scout pilot here and a Devil's Advocate one there, and we'll use Copilot this way. And I think looking forward, we've got to start connecting all of these things under a common governance, common platforms, those sorts of things. So that way, as an eSource solution shows up and has an AI feature in it, it's sort of driving that same safe, guardrailed highway as everything else. And I think from an infrastructure standpoint, what that probably means is that institutions like Duke and others are going to start relying more and more on the Microsofts and others of the world, as well as the vendors of systems like eSource vendors, to be able to handle more and more of that sort of safety, governance, and compliance, so that they come to the table with a little more of a turnkey solution that's embedded, right? So I think right now a lot of AI is kind of like, well, I have my system and I take this and I go and I put it in my ASA and I get feedback and I come back over here and then I actually use what AI told me. I think AI will end up being embedded in these things. And when it comes to eSource tools, I think it should and probably will be helping with like in context summarization of data, coding, data reconciliation and adjudication, and all those things based on logic that's built into them per study, right? As the data is being captured. I mean, in today's eSource world, somebody pulls up, whether it's the sort of push model or pull model, the research person goes in and says, I need to get this data, and they get presented with a whole bunch of data and they have to go through and say, yep, it's that one, that one, that one, that one, and that one. And I think AI should certainly be able, with the right instructions, say, here's your data. And then somebody just goes, yep, that's right. Because you're still, I think, from a compliance standpoint, going to need a human person, like I said earlier, right? The whole verify piece. But instead of having to look through that and pick the ones they want, my hope would be that almost 100% of the time they get exactly what they were expecting and they can just say go, and off it goes. And then maybe we even build enough trust in it that eventually that step can be minimized unless something triggers a secondary review. So that's kind of where I see it going, I think. And I think it's going to get built into everything before and after as well, though. I kind of hope that right now, in order to get eSource going, you have to sort of build from scratch. And that includes all the stuff that we've talked about in the SCDM work groups and consortium, about everything from security to contracting to everything else, right? And everyone involved needs to know that those things have been done. I feel like AI has a real value in being able to let folks know at the time they're needed that everything before them has been completed and they are clear to proceed, if that makes any sense, right? So sort of meeting them where they are and not making them feel like, I know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do it.
Exactly. Just kind of that real time connections. I think what you've described today, and some of the things that you're working on, and things that you've got in mind, and then the future, is just a really exciting place to be in clinical research today. And I really appreciate your time today. I learned a lot, and I'm really looking forward to keeping the conversation going. So thanks again, and for sharing your AI and eSource journey with our audience today.
Absolutely. Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, please join us on Spotify for additional podcast episodes on AI and eSource. And thanks for listening.